Begin in Iran because questions over what President Trump's next move will be in response to the Iranian government's deadly crackdown on demonstrations that swept across the country dominate the news agenda. Mr. Trump said that he's been assured that the executions of protesters have stopped, but he didn't give many more details. Well, meanwhile, some US and UK military personnel have been evacuated from a huge American airbase in Qatar. Several countries, including the UK, have closed their embassies in Tehran. Well, Iran's airspace to commercial flights was closed for several hours overnight. These are the live images tracking flights across the region. Inside Iran itself, figures from one of the human rights groups suggest that more than 3,000 people have been killed in the recent protests. Well, our first report is from Simon Jones.
The funeral of a teenage protester in the west of Iran, here a life celebrated. More than 2,400 anti-government demonstrators have been killed in a crackdown by the authorities, according to a US-based rights group, leaving President Trump weighing up whether to take military action against the regime. But just as signals were multiplying an attack might be imminent, a more conciliatory tone.
We've been told that the killing in Iran is stopping, and it's stopped, and it's stopping. And there's no plan for executions or executions. So I've been told that a good authority. We'll find out about it.
Does this mean military action is now off the table against Iran?
No, we're going to watch and see what the process is.
Iran had closed its airspace, fearing an attack. The US and UK have pulled some military personnel from this base in Qatar in order to ensure their safety. The Foreign Office has updated its travel advice for several destinations popular with British tourists, including Turkey, Egypt and Cyprus, due to what it calls a heightened risk of regional tension. And there have been fears for the life of Irfan Soltani, the owner of a clothes shop, who's become the face of the protests against the Iranian government. His family says he's been sentenced to death, but that the execution has been suspended. The judiciary says he hasn't been given the death penalty. In an interview with Fox News, Iran's foreign minister insisted there were no plans for hangings, suggesting Tehran may be heeding President Trump's warning.
My message is, between war and diplomacy is a better way, although we don't have any positive experience from the United States.
Supporters of the Iranian regime have been on the streets for a mass funeral, the coffins carrying members of the security forces and others linked to the government killed in the last few days of bloodshed.
We could be on the precipice of history where an evil regime falls, or we could see them continue to kill their way through survival, killing their own people. So the president is monitoring the situation.
After the protest, the world is still waiting and watching. Is President Trump trying to buy more time to move additional military assets into the region? Is he having second thoughts? Or is he just trying to preserve the element of surprise? Simon Jones, BBC News.
Well, our correspondent John Sudworth is in Jerusalem, and John's been looking at the impacts across the region.
Well, Israel considers Iran to be its arch rival, of course, Kasher, a malign regional influence and a existential threat. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has spoken of Israel standing shoulder to shoulder with the Iranian people in their fight for freedom. But that said, there have been reports in the Israeli press in recent days that the Israeli government, seeing now US military action as increasingly likely, has been urging caution. There are obviously unpredictable risks with military action, a concern perhaps that the Ayatollah's grip on Tehran is not quite as weak as the protests may have led us to believe, and the concern that a bombing campaign could have the opposite of the desired effect and end up rallying the Iranian people to the flag. Now, obviously, as we heard in Simon's piece there, we're getting mixed messages out of Washington. These latest comments from President Trump suggesting that perhaps America may now be prepared to wait. Is that a result of Israel, the concerns being raised by Israel, and not to mention, of course, other Gulf allies of America who may be concerned about the unpredictable risks of military action? At this stage, we just don't know.
John Sudworth in Jerusalem. Well, I spoke to Dr. Hannah Newman. She's chair of the European Parliament's Delegation for Relations with Iran, and she's been following developments there and also Donald Trump's position.
So by Monday, he said he's going to have negotiations with the regime. Then on Wednesday, so yesterday morning, we had his idea to increase tariffs against countries that help Iran with the sanctions circumvention, which I actually think was a pretty smart move. Then we had this announcement of he's going to come for the help of protesters. And now he's kind of backtracking. And the soundbite that we heard from him saying that he was being assured there are no more killings, there are no more executions, frankly said to me, this sounds like Iranian regime propaganda. What I hear from inside Iran, the few international phone calls that people can make, we still don't have internet connectivity, but people can make phone calls, is that people are either burying their family members because really the deaths are in the thousands, or they are locked into their homes because there are snipers on all corners, and they're really surveying people. So if ever they meet groups of 2 or 3 people, they instantly start shooting. That is the kind of information, of course, we can't verify that, but that's the kind of information I get from trusted sources inside Iran by phone calls. So clearly, the killing is not over, and I don't know where Trump gets his information from.
That is really interesting. Thanks for just talking us through that. In terms of next steps, we know that Reza Pahlavi has been very vocal about what is going on. He is the son of the last Shah of Iran, but it's interesting that he has been describing himself very much as the crown prince in order to disassociate himself from the Shah, because, of course, that was overthrown with a revolution, and that's why we have this Islamic regime there. What do you make of his potential for being a possible opposition leader?
Reza Pahlavi is living outside of Iran, which is why he can be very vocal. And he was clearly instrumental in bringing people to the streets on the last weekend. But if ever, and at the moment, I mean, everybody's trying to bring down this regime, if ever Iranians are in the position to discuss about a transition, I think this transition will be very, very difficult, and it will need all hands on board. Besides Reza Pahlavi, there are a number of other political opposition figures, a number of human rights figures. Many of them are at the moment inside Iran, so that's why we don't hear from them, or they are even in other prisons, which is why also they are just not as visible as Pahlavi, but that doesn't mean that the transition wouldn't need them.
And so in terms of the pressure that the international community is putting on Iran, we know that the European Union has put sanctions on Iran due to its human rights abuses, also nuclear proliferation activities, military support for Russia's war against Ukraine. And yet the regime continues. And I just wonder, in terms of what is left, what options the international community has in order to support the Iranian people who, as you say, are losing their lives in their thousands.
I would say at the moment there are 4 concrete things that we could still work on. The first one, and I'm very frustrated that we still didn't get that, is the listing of the Revolutionary Guard as a terror organization. I mean, we see these pictures, how they're terrorizing their own people, and we also know how they're terrorizing the whole region. There is not one conflict in the Middle East in which the Revolutionary Guard is not escalating and making everyone's life very miserable. So we really need to put them on the terror list, and I think Kaya Kallas needs to become public now about which member states are blocking so that we can increase the pressure on them, because clearly the population all over Europe does not accept this blocking anymore of the terror list. The second issue is internet communication. We have the blackout inside Iran, the internet blackout. We also had a phone connection blackout for 4 to 5 days. And there are ways and means with D2C communication. It's a bit techy, but basically we can make sure that it will not be so easy in the future for the regime to block out the internet. On that one, we can work. We have to expel, from my position, we clearly have to expel regime ambassadors, consular personnel, because they are misusing diplomatic privilege at the moment to issue their propaganda here in the European Union, and also to harass, intimidate, abduct Iranian diaspora figures.
So can I ask, just apologies for interrupting, but I just wonder, because you've got the authority to do that, why haven't you expelled them?
Well, I personally don't have the authority to do that. I have one authority, that's to expel them from the European Parliament, and that's what we have done. The problem is that we still have governments in the European Union that are reluctant to take these decisive steps. They have been reluctant while we had the nuclear negotiation going on, still dreaming of a nuclear agreement that, from my perspective, never was on the table anymore. Now that one is gone, so I'm really losing understanding for why some governments in the European Union are not really doing these steps, and that is why I'm in your program and in many other programs advocating for that.
Our thanks to Dr. Newman. She is the chair of the European Parliament's delegation for relations with Iran.